Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros MLB. This is Leading Off, brought to you by bet365. Bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets when you use the promo code Leading Off only at bet365. It is me, Joey P. That, of course, is the Welsh, and we are going to look ahead to the future of Major League Baseball. That's right. The Futures game was this weekend. The MLB Draft was this weekend. And for all the people who love prospects like the Welsh, this is pretty much Christmas time. So we're going to open up the presents that each organization seems to have under their own respective Christmas trees. And we are going to see where these guys fit, how long it's going to take for them to make an impact in the big leagues. And Welsh, I think we have to start here with the MLB Draft. The number one pick, I think, was kind of a foregone conclusion. We talked about it on Leading Off Live last week. I know there was a little bit of buzz that it might change, but I feel like that happens every year, and then we come back to normal. So let's walk through the first round here. And, the guy at the top was indeed Travis Bazzana, who is the guy that we thought should have been the number one overall pick too.
Yeah, and there was thought that he was not going to be the number one pick going on. So, Joe, if you want to put up that board here, we've got the first 10 picks here. The betting odds changed hours before the draft, and JJ Weatherhold was the minus money play. So you actually got plus money on Travis Bazzana because the thought was Cleveland might not want to do the price tag. But our first round ended up Travis Bazzana at 1, Chase Burns at 2, Charlie Condon fell to 3, Nick Kurtz at 4, Hagen Smith goes to the White Sox at 5, Kansas City got Jack Caglione, JJ Weatherhold at 7, Christian Moore went to the Angels, Connor Griffin, the high school bat, went 9 to Pittsburgh, and Seaver King went to Washington at 10. And our storylines out of this, JJ Weatherhold maybe going over Bazzana, but Cleveland did the right thing. Charlie Condon falling to Colorado is like a dream come true for fantasy. We'll talk about that later. The big power bat fell a little bit. Oakland shocked us by taking Nick Kurtz. We also found out Oakland said after the fact, Joe, that Nick Kurtz was the number one player on their board in the spring and still was. So they got their number one overall player. And I'd say the other really interesting one besides Weatherhold falling was Jack Caglione fell to 6 to Kansas City, which no one expected him going outside the top 5, but he was announced as a two-way player. Probably not going to mean too much. I don't know if he'll really pitch, but I had said this on the CBS broadcast. The Giants did this, and a lot of people in the baseball realm will go, it's just cute. They'll let him do it, and then they'll pick a position. And I used the Giants as reference when I was on because the Giants took Reggie Crawford and Bryce Eldridge, both two-way players, both players they let, or in theory, were going to let pitch. And then they cut it, and they said, Reggie, you're now a pitcher. Bryce, you're now a hitter. The difference is Caglione is a college player, maybe a little bit more polished. Maybe they'll feel it. But there actually were quite a few surprises in that first round. But the best thing about it was just good that Travis Bazzana did end up. The best player ended up going 1. There was no haircuts and money shaving and anything like that. He went number 1, and we are going to talk about him here in a little bit on my first-year player board and how a lot of these first-rounders who will end up in, obviously, the top 10 of first-year player drafts, where they slot.
Christian Moore went at 8 to the Angels. Then the Pirates took Connor Griffin at 9 and Seaver King at 10 to Washington. I think Caglione was a steal for Kansas City. And we were just having this discussion, I feel like, Welsh, about Kansas City. You look at the pitching staff, you look at Bobby Witt Jr., and you say, okay, they're kind of like one big middle of the order guy away. Oh my God, they got that guy. Like, I think he's going to be in the major leagues in a year and a half. I really do. I think he's going to zoom through. He made some incredible adjustments with the strikeouts year over year. I've watched a lot of his at-bats. He looks like a guy who's a very polished hitter. He's a big kid. He's got big time power. I just love him. And I think it's an absolute steal. To me, he was the number 2 player on my board of everybody that I saw and of all the tape that I watched. And Bazzana was the one clearly for me. But Caglione was number 2, and the fact that they got him at where they got him, the Royals have a steal here.
The interesting thing too is there's a part of me that might have even been more comfortable with Caglione over Condon. If you're looking at the big power bats, they both have they both have big power bats, but they both have chasing issues. But when you look at Caglione, his negatives, 38% chase rate, which it was the worst by far of any of the first round college bats. He also had a pretty big ground ball rate, but almost 92% in-zone contact percentage, which was best among all of the college bats in the first round. 121 max EV, and a 111.7 90th percentile exit velocity, which was the best among those college bats. So all this is to say he has immense power plus an 8% strikeout rate. So he chased a lot, but did not strike out. We'll see how that kind of fares. It's just a great destination. He's a power bat that's going to be hitting behind Bobby Witt for a long time. It really is like a really good spot.
All right, next up we have the second round picks 11 through 20. So Welsh, walk us through here.
All right, Detroit took Bryce Rayner at 11. Boston, they got a huge value in Braden Montgomery. James Tibbs went to San Francisco. Kem Smith, 14 to Chicago. Gerangelo, oh, his last name always kills me. He's an ambidextrous pitcher in Seattle. It's Sinjata. I'm going to totally screw it up, but Gerangelo, ambidextrous.
I think Gerangelo is good enough. I think
we're going to stick
a lot
there.
of Gerangelos where we're going to get confused about that. But I have watched the ambidextrous pitcher. I saw, correct. I'm sorry. I can't say the name either. We'll work on that. We got a lot going on here this week. But it is fun to think of, we have Shohei Ohtani, two-way player. We have another guy just got drafted as a two-way player. It's fun to think of an ambidextrous pitcher. It's fun to see the evolution of Major League Baseball, and especially a guy with that kind of talent being selected at 15 overall by Seattle.
Well, also that they will let him do this. Like that's the thought is they're going to let him do that. Finishing up 16, PJ Morlando, Braylon Payne went 17 to Milwaukee, Theo Gillen, 18, Carson Benj to the Mets at 19, and Trey Yesavage at 20. And there are some names in here I love, specifically the top two in this round. I love Bryce Rayner, high school bat, who I thought could have gone ahead of Connor Griffin. While watching my stuff, you always love these confirmations. I'm watching and I'm going, boy, this has Corey Seager feels to me. And then you read after the fact. That's kind of my process. You read after the fact and you see people literally saying Corey Seager. It's because he'll sit back on the ball, explode on it, and he's like a big 6'4" shortstop. So I love Bryce Rayner. The other one, Braden Montgomery falling to 12 was really a shock because this is another one of those huge, big power bats. He had the best average exit velocity of all the college bats in the first round, 98.7 average exit velocity. That was number one. He had a great 34% barrel rate in college, but contact issues, 74% contact rate was well below average and only 49% out of the zone contact rate. So I tell you all that to say maybe those were reasons why he fell a little bit. So that was a storyline. And the other storyline was that middle part where Miami and then the Brewers both took high school kids that no one expected. I love PJ Morlando, but PJ Morlando I did not think he'd be in near the top 15, and Braylon Payne wasn't even on a radar for that. And then they didn't make up for it later. So I actually really hated what Milwaukee did. But those were the shocks. While a few players dropping, Braden Montgomery, Trey Yesavage, no one expected those guys to kind of fall out of that round. So those are a few of the storylines. And there's a guy or two that will make my top 10 first-year player that was in this 11 to 20 range.
If you want to know why the Marlins are always the Marlins, it's because they keep drafting high school kids. I don't know when they're going to figure this out. It's just, I understand they come a little cheaper, but at the end of the day, it's like why they continue. You have to wait for the development longer. There's so many negative things that can happen in there. I hate it. It's been a Marlins thing for ages now, and they keep on doing it.
They did well in their last pick, but yeah.
All right, but like it's still philosophically it's a problem. Let's go to 21 through 30 here. Start with Culpepper here for the Minnesota Twins at 21.
Yeah, 21, Kalen Culpepper, college shortstop. Vance Honeycutt went 22 to Baltimore. Kellen Lindsay, 23 to the Dodgers. Cam Caminiti. Yes, as everyone mentions, cousins of the late Ken Caminiti, went 24 to Atlanta. Cash Mayfield to the Padres at 26. Ben Hess to the Yankees at 26. Cash was 25. Ben Hess, 26. Dante Nori goes to Philly at 27. Walker Janik, 28 to Houston. Slade Caldwell to my Diamondbacks at 29. And Malcolm Moore, the catcher, goes to Texas to round out the first round. The storylines here, there were a couple, like Ben Hess was not a good pick. I didn't like that. I don't really care about the catchers here. What I will tell you is Cam Caminiti is maybe the steal of the draft, falling down to 24. I was shocked that he did. I pinpointed that as maybe the best pick in the draft in the first round. The big winners were them because Cam Caminiti, 9-0 in high school. They won a state championship. It's out here locally, but had a 0.9 ERA and over 100 strikeouts in college. And he's got mid-90s fastball, which is a huge graded pitch, 3 other pitches. High school pitching in fantasy is kind of tough. but I think he's polished enough. And Atlanta not only develops them well, but moves them. This is a great pick, and he's going to end up being a sneaky one. And I will tell you, a guy that did not make my top 10, but I am higher on than everybody, and this was before the Diamondbacks took him, Slade Caldwell was, I couldn't have been more ecstatic about that. I think he's going to be a fantasy play. Kind of has a Corbin Carroll feel, a little bit smaller in stature type of guy, but he can run, defensively play well. There is pop in that bat. There's a lot of good contact. Like, this is a 5-tool player. I had him top like 12 or 14 going into this draft, and he fell down to 29 to the Diamondbacks.
All right, so landing spot matters, talent matters, a lot of things matter in terms of your fantasy productivity from these guys, what we're going to get in dynasty leagues and in keeper leagues and even in our redraft leagues, because we see these guys rocket through systems. Paul Skeens, it's going to happen fast for some of these kids. So Welsh, let's look at your top 10 here. Bazana at 1, Charlie Condon goes to Colorado. You and I can fight about this one. I don't see it. I understand the stats are there. I get it. Caglione is my 2, and Condon to me is farther down for sure. You have Chase Burns going to the Reds here at 4 is your favorite. Then Weatherholt, who he does have a bit of a Chase Utley with maybe a little bit more explosiveness in terms of what he brings. Like, Chase Utley was a great player, a Hall of Fame player, probably in my opinion. But Weatherholt has a little bit more athleticism, that raw athleticism that I really like. I think he is going to be a great fantasy player, and the Cardinals are a great organization. Braden Montgomery you have at 6 from the Boston Red Sox, then Rayner at 7 with Detroit. You have Nick Kurtz in Oakland at 8. Christian Moore, who goes to the Angels. Christian Moore, to me, reminds me just a little bit of Justin Upton in him in terms of the swing, in terms of the path there. Connor Griffin, the shortstop, goes to the Pittsburgh Pirates there. Again, I think Griffin is a bit of a project, but I want to talk to you about these guys. I know Seaver King did not make this list. He was top 10 at Washington. He reminds me of Byron Buxton. I'm surprised he didn't make your list because I know how much you love Buxton. When I watch King play, that's a guy that I say, okay, he's got a lot of that raw athleticism. The baseball stuff I always thought with Buxton would come a little later because he was such a raw athletic talent. But I watched Seaver King a lot, and I was surprised he didn't make your top 10. But let's talk about these guys in the top 10 because you have very clear feelings about all of them. So let's go through the breakdown here.
Yeah. And just on Seaver King, like, he's pretty close in there, but I think it's really, there's a really difficult space for power projection. And I don't see that that's coming because also it's like a more advanced college body. So I don't know how much more physical projection there is for him to grow. But
see, that's why I liked him, because I saw Buxton in him, but Buxton, if you recall, very thin. You were waiting for him to project physically. And we can argue about that, never really did.
Sure.
Whereas this kid looked a little bit more like, all right, a little bit fully formed man-child, not like Jack Caglione man-child, of course. Like that is a big dude. That's a dude that's going to hit. But look, Travis Bazana, doesn't get much better than this. Golden Spikes Award winner, 407, 568, 911, 28 homers, 16 steals in his junior year. So we could talk more there and take us through the rest of these guys.
Yeah, I will.
We'll take them through real quick.
So the actual big conversation, I know you're not as big as Condon. It is going to be Condon versus Bazana in the dynasty world. And Condon is there through all of some of the negatives because he's now in Colorado. And I think actually a lot of people are going to put him at number 1 because of the Colorado side of it. But in going and really digging deep, I was able to get like a lot of like college data information. And those are things I'm going to talk about. It's just hard to not go on Travis Bazana. I would say the one thing that could hold you back is the explosion. I think I mentioned this before. 28 homers this year. That's more than every single homer combined of the rest of his college career, the Cape Cod League, and 3 years of playing in Australia. He didn't have 28 homers with all of those combined of what he did last year. So it was such a big output, but his profile's ridiculous. 41.1% barrel rate in college. Wide margin better than any of the other top end college bats. 96 average exit velocity. That's an elite number. Only a few other bats ended up beating that. Also, 13% chase rate. Does not chase. And this is a cool piece of information. I have miss rate on sliders, 13%. So he didn't get eat up by breaking pitches. He didn't chase anything bad. Had a 400 batting average, all the homers, stole bases, barrels the ball. Listen, also, go put him in Cleveland, where what did they just do? They opened
That's what I was going to say. Welsh, we're talking about Colorado for Condon. What about Cleveland for Bazana with the way the ball's jumping out of there this year?
They just opened up that right field wall, which now is creating this air pocket for left-handed hitters that are pulling right side. ta-da, it's a great spot for Bazzana, where you go into Condon and you go, okay, Colorado is an elite spot. It is literally the best destination for him because there is, some swing and whiff issues that are going on overall, but he has like elite power. The best college bat versus high velocity was him. 88.7% contact percentage above against 92 plus mile per hour velocity. Colorado, that's a great place to be, but absolutely destroyed by sliders. 33% slider miss rate. It's hard hit versus swing and miss, and that's going to be his thing. But he might have 40 plus home run power in Colorado, so that's what's so tantalizing about it.
I guess here's the thing. Like I see the same thing, which is I'm concerned about the thing that I took away from the at bats that I watched of his was sure he's got power. He's obviously a good player. I'm not trying to knock the player. He went number 2 in the MLB draft, but we see this every year. Number 3, excuse me. But he was number 2 or 1 on some people's boards.
Oh yeah.
I thought that he would struggle with some of the better pitching in the major leagues. Colorado, not the greatest in terms of developing talent. We've seen that. We've seen a lot of like talent go there. And we always have to look back on the draft and we go, oh, boy, there was a big swing and miss there in the top 10. It happens every single year. I think Chris Bryant at his best is the upside for him. I think Richie Sexson is kind of at his worst is where he might end up. And that is a wide range of outcomes. Whereas Bazzana, I think the truly special players are the ones that I have a hard time finding comps for. And Bazzana is one of those guys, when I watch him play, he's very unique. And I think that's what those special guys come around. When I watched Mike Trout, I remember going, I don't have a comp for this guy. Like, because he is just his own thing. And I've never seen anything like him. That is when a number 1 player to me overall. Let's go through the rest of these guys too. Yep. Caglione, we already kind of, touched on a bit there, but it certainly stands to reason that, a guy that could be a two-way player. We'll see. The power is incredibly impressive. The size is impressive. Do you agree with me that Weatherholt could be a guy that would potentially be that explosive fantasy player? I don't want to say Bobby Witt Jr. type. I think a little bit more Utley type, but do you see that same thing in his game that I saw?
Yeah, I think some people are going to have him higher. Something when I was going through and putting everything together and really, really watching his swing, what actually came across? Reminds me of Corbin Carroll. He actually reminds me in his exact approach where there is this front body load and he gets the bat across the zone just like Corbin Carroll. And he also hits it like him in that it can be an all fields contact where sometimes Corbin doesn't lock into that power. But in the same respect, though, I actually think, like Corbin Carroll, there is power to be unlocked. He had a 95.4 average exit velocity. That was higher than Jack Caglione in college. That's really impressive. And he's kind of a mini Bazzana, 14% chase rate. Yeah. Only Bazzana is better. 10% K percentage. Okay, that'll work. And he was just held back by a hamstring injury, which kind of made the stats look a little bit lower. Weatherhold is seen by many as, like Bazzana, one of the best offensive contact-based players. I don't think he'll have the same power projection, but at the same time, he could be a 20-20 guy that doesn't strike out, hits for a high order, maybe is a leadoff hitter for the Cardinals. I think it's a great spot.
I think he'd be a great.
Well, I got him at number 5, and others might have him higher. They might even have him higher.
He's like Bazzana with more speed, less power. Is that a good way to kind of, if they're trying to simplify it for the folks out there that don't watch a lot of college baseball? That's how I would simplify it.
I think it's something like that. I think like Bazzana's approach is they have like a similar kind of like keep your hands in. Bazzana is bat speed, attack, ball gets up in the air. He's a launch angle guy. Where I look at Weatherhold, he's more of an all field. So like both of these guys will sit back a little bit and let the ball travel. That's what creates like great low strikeout percentage and chase rates. But Weatherhold is about just getting the ball or the bat in the zone to make all fields contact. And that may suppress power. So I say all of that to say he might be a little bit less impactful on the power front, which might hold some of his fantasy value down, but maybe he'll be a great points league player. Either way, he's top 5 for me.
I think he's going to be a great points league player for sure. And I think he could be a great roto player also. I really like him. All right, 6 through 10, who stands out to you the most on this list? Maybe it's because you think they're going to have a quick path or because of the landing spot potentially.
It's great. Just real quick nuggets. Braden Montgomery, there are some contact issues, as I mentioned, but huge power. And Boston is a great landing spot. He was outside the top 10. I love personally Bryce Rayner. I probably will have him higher than a lot. He was a pitcher even in high school, and the transition has been new, but I think there's so much power and upside to unlock. Nick Kurtz is a safe play. He 28% walk percentage in college, which is just absolutely absurd, does not strike out. So this is a phenomenal border like baseline player, but I think the upside is down. I personally freaking love Christian Moore. You were talking about that offensive upside, seeing some of the Upton in him, hit for the cycle, 30 plus homers, makes a ton of contact. I think he could be super sneaky. And Connor Griffin by many was seen as the top high school bat. There are some questions about how impactful his contact and power is going to be. But the kid stole 87 bases in high school this past year, which is absolutely absurd. So again, there's a lot of upside, but I don't view him in the same vein as the last high school guys like Max Clark and Walker Jenkins would rank well above both Rayner and Connor Griffin.
I agree.
It's not a bad top 10. And there are some names that are just falling out. One, people are going to know I didn't mention Hagen Smith. Some view him in the same vein as Chase Burns. I have them a little bit more separated. Slade Caldwell is another one of those players. There's quite a few more. I am constructing all of it, but this is the very, very early post-draft. That's the top 10 for first-year player drafts. So for some of you sickos that are drafting like this week for your first-year player in Dynasty, those are for the sickos.
Hagen Smith, to me, I think is going to end up being a high-end closer. I know people don't want to hear that. I just think that's what he's going to end up being. And that's okay. But if I'm the White Sox, that's not where I want to live in my draft right now with the way my roster is constructed at the major league level. Well, I want to get more position players. So I thought that was a swing and miss for them, even though I like Hagen. I just don't think he suits well for them. And I think the Pirates, with the way that these Jones and Skeens have come along, I think that the fact that they went with the high school kid was a mistake. I want somebody else who's going to contribute soon. And to me, he's more of a project guy. That's just my.
You might not be wrong about that. I mean, Braden Montgomery would have made sense, but they got Wyatt Sanford a little bit later, who I really like. I thought Pittsburgh did a good job on Hagen Smith. Real quick, to your point, he's kind of a two-pitch pitcher. It's fastball, slider. He actually looks like he throws like Strider, but I don't know if the velos will stick quite as much. But Lance Brozdowski did a really good breakdown too. And one interesting thing is how Hagen Smith relied on in-zone missed contact and how that's going to work at the major league level, because you're going to have a lot less guys miss inside the zone. And when you're a primary fastball slider guy, we'll see how it goes. But the interesting thing to think about, though, on that is that they took Hagen Smith, the White Sox did, and maybe that was the move that makes him feel that bit more comfortable trading Garrett Crochet at the trade deadline now. And maybe they can make that a hitting package that they end up getting with whatever team, whether it's the Yankees or whoever comes calling, that they get a hitting side package built around that, because Hagen Smith, they view as a future number one to go with like Drew Thorpe and Jairo Iriarty. Just something to ruminate on.
All right, let's ruminate on the futures game too. Welsh has some standouts he wanted to touch on. So Welsh, walk us through these guys.
Yeah, if we're talking about prospects and we're talking about draft day, let's talk about the futures game. Kind of underwhelming overall. Your actual statistical standouts from the game. Cam Collier ended up winning MVP. He hit a kind of majestic home run. His swing is looking more and more like Rafael Devers. Just want to put out there, good contact guy, lowering his strikeouts. He's kind of a sleeper in that realm. Kyle Teal hit 2 doubles and really might have been the sneakiest standout. One of them was Drew Jones kind of dropped one in center field, but he just, like, this guy has power, all fields contact again. Like, you got to love him. And Drake Baldwin ended up hitting a homer, kind of not on a lot of radars, especially for fantasy, but it was an opposite-ish field, a home run. So he really showed off the power. Those were your actual standouts. But Joe, there were also some other players who didn't completely show out that are worth talking about. And these guys right here, these are my guys that you should watch from this game. Bryce Eldridge is one of my favorite dynasty prospects. Didn't do anything nuts. He was 1 for 2. He ended up scoring a run, but we're talking about these big physical, the Jack Caglions of the world and stuff. Bryce Eldridge was that guy last year, the two-way player who's now a hitter. I think you're like in the top 50 in dynasty realm for Bryce Eldridge. Roman Anthony, he wasn't in the futures game. He was in the skills competition. And just an interesting anecdotal thing about his power, he was in like 6th place going into this final round. And the skills competition was, bunting and hitting. He ended up hitting like 6 straight homers and ended up winning the skills competition and showed off absolute ridiculous power. And that's what he is built around. And then a couple pitchers I've been talking about, if you listen to me in the offseason, Emiliano Teodo pitched 2 perfect frames. And I don't think that had happened in the futures game before. Guy going 2 and having perfect frames. That was ridiculous. He is a guy that hits 102. James Triantos, I talked about him with in my interview in the offseason. And Teodo's been working as a starter. And oh my God, if he's a starter, he might be crazy. But if he goes to relief, he's 102. And you're met. Brandon Sprout, he had this really good, clean inning where he was touching 99 in the futures game and had a foul hit where he broke the bat on the 99 and got a pop out. Just very impressive. Those are all guys that you should have maybe on your prospect radar here that were in the futures game that weren't the actual standouts that are going to be written about, like the Cam Colliers and the Kyle Teals.
Nobody better than the Welsh when it comes to prospects, in my humble opinion. So luckily you get to be here and talk and educate all of us. Some great conversations. Obviously, you can hit Welsh up too on X at Is It The Welsh if you have questions about these guys, because he can talk about any of them for as long as you need. And of course, continue to check out all of his work at FantasyPros.com as well. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For the Welsh, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.